Hi everyone, and welcome to Week 9, Leadership and Management Development, LMD. So the overview of the lecture, we're continuing on Module 3, which is the continuing consideration of HRD at work. And last week we looked at workplace learning and knowledge management within the wider organisational context. So this week we're looking at leader and management development, looking at different approaches to it, the key issues and complexities, and thinking about future trends. So definitions and important of LMD. It is a planned and deliberate process to help leaders and managers become more effective. A process of learning for leaders and managers through recognised opportunities. So again, you can see this idea coming through that it's a deliberate process of training and development which follows a process and is evaluated right through. However, in reality, it is sometimes formal, but also sometimes more informal. So that can be through informal processes such as mentoring someone else, which is more like regular catch-ups, for example. And if you do actually encounter a learning organisation and you can help to develop one, that has many opportunities for LMD because learning organisations provide those sort of opportunities. People are aware of learning opportunities. People look at problems as an opportunity to learn. People are happy to discuss different issues and are open about that. So it's important to develop positive and productive individuals and organisations. So that's been a bit of a theme throughout where we're interested in people, hoping that they're feeling satisfied in where they're working and that they're able to achieve their potential, and that feeds into organisations. And I guess on the dark side, one of the factors associated with destructive workplace bullying cultures has been found to be laissez-faire leadership, so very loose leadership, or autocratic, so where you're absolutely told what to do. So laissez-faire, where there's an openness, a lack of processes, some people are treated differently to another. This is where these negative aspects of the workplace can really flourish. So leader and manager development is about trying to strike a good balance between appropriate processes, surfacing issues, and becoming a learning organisation. So we have mental models about leadership, and they'll differ. So what do you see as your mental model? It would be really good if you can write down just what your mental model of leadership is. Is it someone who shares? Is it someone who can facilitate good relationships, can help solve problems? Is it a leader out the front? What is your own mental model? What colour is it? And also, along with that, write down some ideas on how you see leadership and management and whether there's actually any difference. So leadership is usually associated with providing direction and maintaining engagement, tends to be future-oriented, strategic, visionary, and influencing others in the achievement of relevant goals. So it's seen as a very positive process. Management is more associated usually with planning, organising, coordinating, way up to commanding, controlling, much more focused on the present and concerned with efficiencies. In the 1930s, as you may well know, human relations school challenged this view of management, and it introduced a much more psychological approach. So managers involved with group and team behaviours, with motivation, influence of work condition, and conflict management. So really trying to discern, well, what is actually management, and noting that really a lot of it is about people interacting help thinking about motivation, influence of work conditions. So poor work conditions will obviously impact on people and therefore on achievements. So research shows managers work in actually fragmented in various ways with high levels of interpersonal, conversational, informational and decision aspects in their role. A lot of it seems to be quite informal, quite tacit, hidden, those ideas that we've talked about, where it's a little bit hard to say, well, you know, this is exactly what it is. It's something that a person knows once they've experienced in that role, but it mightn't be able to be written down. So the text argues, your textbook, that there's no really clear separation between leadership and management roles. So from that perspective, it adopts a learning management development approach and seeks to encompass both concepts within that. So if you actually have a formal role as a manager, you would need to have leadership competencies, and any leader will have management aspects to their role. And also employees who may not have a formal role can learn how to take more initiative to gather and share information to develop their own skills. And they could, for example, really take a facilitation and leadership role in a meeting that they're not chairing, but they may see the opportunity to perhaps summarise what's happening to date or identify a problem that hasn't been discussed. So there's lots and lots of ways that an LM role can come forward. And indeed, in the literature, there's a vast number of models and ideas related to learner management development. What have you experienced of those? Try and identify them and think about them. What courses have you been on? Have you received mentoring, coaching? How is it that you have developed your own leadership skills? Among all of these different approaches, there's the domains of challenges, context and characteristics that are really honed in on, so for you to develop knowledge, skills and abilities. So challenges, actions to deal with challenges, critical problems such as conflict, prioritising if things are, so that things don't go off the rails, how to progress the overall vision, not just have it there as some words on a piece of paper. Context is how do you work in a particular organisation, how do you build sets of relationships and network, develop or drive strategy in that particular context. It is important, but sometimes neglected. And the third is characteristics. So what individual talents do you have? So if you've been to a leadership development program, that is really one of the things that often you do, is fill in a personality scale and then discuss that with others. So that's important from the knowing yourself perspective, and it is highlighted, but it shouldn't be emphasised at the expense of the many other aspects of the leadership role. So like all HRD programs, leadership and management develop initiatives have to be well thought out, and the same old process that we've talked about. Needs assessment, so what does a particular individual group or organisation need? How do we design the best program and deliver it in the most appropriate way to engage people, to make sure it's action-based, etc., and also to evaluate what's the best way to do that. And remembering that evaluation occurs at the end of a program and also into the future to see how those learnings have transferred to the actual workplace, and whether there's anything that can be measurable, such as fewer customer complaints, for example, higher work satisfaction, for example, those types of things. Again, staying with this idea of transfer, how do you use the skills, set goals, gain feedback, have mentoring and coaching and ongoing development opportunities. So just like with all training, the complexity of the role and leadership management skills Can't just be taught like filling up a jug. Again, you need opportunities to practice and support back in the workplace. So the research does show evidence of links between having leadership and management development and feeling more engaged. So again, this idea that HRD is a very positive thing to be involved in. So in terms of LMD excellence, you can think strategically. In terms of thinking abilities, you can manage others, your relationships, you can lead people, but importantly you can manage yourself. So that's where emotional competencies come in. So and where the actual personality test may help you to identify strengths and weaknesses. But again, what we're doing in this unit is reflecting. So reflection is a powerful tool to help you look at what happened in a particular situation. What would you have liked to have improved about your own management of that situation, and how can you improve in the future? So that is really where that idea of reflecting comes in, managing yourself. And then task-wise, managing activities, quality, information, resources. So how do we manage our knowledge? How do we form a learning organisation? How do we make things easy for people to tap into development opportunities? These are quite a few groups here of how you might implement LMD, and just have a think about which of these you may have experienced. On one quadrant, you've got your training events and courses looking at competencies in the job. And the second quadrant, you've got more experiential activities, coaching and mentoring, action learning. Quadrant 3, groups and team development. And question 4 is more into research and large group interventions, as you might have in a large scale change program in an organisation. So these same 4 quadrants are spelled out a bit more here, and they're also in your textbook. So the first quadrant, about you can learn about best practice, you can consider different models, ideas, theories, and learn about a particular job. The second is about the learning perspective, developing thinking skills, learning to coach others or be coached yourself, mentoring of someone else or yourself, action learning, etc. And then the third quadrant, developing teams, groups, communities. So we talked earlier about communities of practice, how to keep a learning organisation alive, those sorts of things. And the fourth quadrant is learning across large groups, similar to a learning organisation, including knowledge management. So they're the 4 areas you might like to think about when you're designing an LMD program. They're all important and they all interrelate. So, as I said, LMD can be approached from many angles, and those angles can be interrelated. Ideally, we're talking about the creation of social capital by enhancing the collective ability of people to undertake leadership roles, including building social networks, accessing resources, and developing communities. Commitments. So a community of practice is clearly about bringing people together about a particular interest. So at Griffith Uni, there might be a community practice about a particular research area. So informally, people can discuss and share resources, and they might develop teams within that particular group. There doesn't have to be a formal process for that. No one's in charge necessarily. It's usually a shared responsibility. And once again, we can use evaluation to think about the outcomes of LMD. So in a communities of practice example, if you encourage the development of communities of practice in your organisation, obviously people would give you feedback about how that went, what they've achieved, that sort of thing. So the current thinking and the types of influence on training needs analysis, development needs analysis in the area of leadership and management development is this idea of emotional skills. That's very high on the agenda. Can people, can managers, can leaders deal with emotions in a positive way, including their own? Not taking things personally, not getting upset, using disagreement as a way forward. Okay, we've got different perspectives here. What are we going to do with that? Building relationships and facilitating change. A lot of those personal competencies. Distributed leadership has been around for a long time, but it's still in vogue in that, we're trying not to think about leadership as someone who's just out the front. We all can take leadership roles. Importance of followership is another strand that people have looked at. So how do you get people to come on board to support the organisation and to support the team? Promoting self-directed teams, awareness of the mission, the goals and the self. So always trying to keep that strategic view. Another facet is focus on ethical, responsible, authentic leadership. That's been around too for a long time. We often see examples where we question perhaps the ethics of what's happened in our political leaders, that sort of thing. So it's trying to have leaders that we can really trust. And authentic leadership is the idea that who are you as a person? You don't have to be someone else. You kind of being yourself, but developing skills as you go through. There is a focus on lifelong learning and knowing yourself, and realising that there's no one best way, that there's social processes within particular situations. So the idea of a context. If you work in a manufacturing industry where people have worked on an assembly line forever, then there's particular relationships and divisions between management and employees. If you then decide that there's a better way of working, you might move into team-based programs or self-directed teams, and then changing from the old way of thinking to the new way is a whole different social process will occur. And that would need to be worked on. People help through that. And the final point here is that everyone can show leadership. We all have to take responsibility and try not to just blame whatever happens on something or someone else. So, like other HRD programs, learner management development must take into account the vision, the mission, the goals of the organisation. So where strategically are we heading? The needs at the individual, group and organisational levels. Need to design programs and parts of program segments to address these needs, and do this in a way which is theoretically sound and practically sound. So what do we actually need in this context? We need to be able to implement strong design and then be able to assess appropriate skills throughout. So we need to think about how learning is transferred from our sessions into the workplace, and how do we evaluate all the aspects, including the reactions, the learnings, the transfer to the job and the improvements to the organisation. So there's the Kirkpatrick model. It is the one we look at in this unit. And then once we've evaluated, of course, we have to link back to needs. Is there something that hasn't been met? Are there things we could have designed better? That's so that we always have an ongoing learning approach. So just some of the issues and complexities. Transfer of learning, I have talked about, but the other three are interesting just to have a check on ourselves about how we're going with these. So, as you know, transfer of learning isn't automatic. People need to be assisted to try out new behaviours sometimes, given the opportunity. How do they do that? So one way to do that in your HRD program is to have an action plan with dates and what you're going to do. So sometimes in fact very often writing things down is a lot, gives you the prompts to and the enthusiasm to do what you're hoping to do. So focus on the individual. So the idea of involving everyone in leadership and seeing leadership as a collective property is quite distinctive. So that's very different from a leader out the front that we might have in our mind. So it's interesting when I spoke about mental models at the beginning, what actually came to your mind, and do you see that focusing on the individual leader can be somewhat detrimental for everyone else who also can have leadership qualities? A third issue is the dominance of a functionalist approach. It's been criticised for having a unitarist perspective where organisational members are assumed to share a single set of motives and interests. So you're all the same, you can all have the same training and development, etc. So it's an attempt by senior management perhaps to impose or control or advance their own particular agendas or power interests, this assumption that everyone's the same. And another issue has been that managers, leaders and teams tend to be portrayed in a standardised way, whereas we know in the real world there's different people, different backgrounds. We have a totally different Australian population to what we had years ago. It's very diverse, and so I think we are really much more aware of that now, but that is something that can hold your thinking back if you just assume that everyone's so different. But our needs analysis really gets at that idea. We show in that we appreciate that people are different, will have different needs. And fourthly, is this tendency that we have towards conformity rather than diversity. It does relate to the previous point that some sort of pre-packaged solution will be just imposed, whereas the creativity of the people within, their opportunity to do something different, can be overlooked. So that's a problem in terms of having people engaged and involved. So we don't want to have plans and design constantly imposed. We want people working in that particular job to have input. So in conclusion, we've talked about learner management development conceptually, considered it from various interrelated perspectives, and how it is applied to learner management development. There are issues and complexities that we've talked about, and I'd like you now to think about the case studies that are up here under unit content. Please read those, consider the questions, and then link these ideas that we've been talking about, say in learner management development today. Leader management development to these cases, so that you can kind of think, okay, this is a practical situation, a way of applying it. Next week we go on to look again at Module 3, and we're looking at talent and career management, which is of course related to LMD. Thank you.